So what's happening with space arks all over the Earth? Are Nordics taking control of them? Is there an agenda happening behind the scenes? Today we have Alex Collier, the Andromedan contactee, who's going to give us his perspective on space arks, Nordics, inner-Earth civilizations, the Andromedans, and many other extraterrestrial-related topics.
You're listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla, your source for the uncensored truth regarding the human, extraterrestrial, global, and political agenda. Click the like button and subscribe to this channel. And now, here's Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, I'm here with the legend himself, Alex Collier. Well, welcome, Alex, to Exopolitics Today.
Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be here with the legend himself, Dr. Michael Salla.
Well, Alex, I mean, who would have thought that we would be experiencing what we're seeing now? I mean, the UFO issue is going mainstream. People are paying attention. People want to know what's going on. And of course, you know, you go back to the early 90s, you know, you got that incredible experience and knowledge of what's been happening for over 30 years now, 33 years publicly talking about this. So yeah, so what's happening now that really gets your attention?
Well, you know, your last update from JP lit a fuse, frankly. Now, we'll get to the Nordics in a minute, but having experienced telepathy myself, never at any point was I compelled to do something against my will or do something that I would not normally do. Now, I want to say right up front, this has nothing to do with JP or his credibility. I know the man. I like the man. He's got a wonderful family. And beyond a reason, by any reasonable doubt, I know he's sincere. But let's just go back to his story. He was driving along the highway. He sees the ship fly over. He pulls over, he jumps out of the car, leaving the car on, keys in the ignition, and the lights, and the door open. And he walks into the woods, where he has a contact. Now, Michael, he had just left base. His gear was either in the back seat or in the trunk of the car. None of it's secure because he just got out of the car and walked into the woods. That is not what a trained spec officer does. No how, no way. That's number one. Number two, he walked towards the ship. He didn't recognize the Nordic. He was motioned to come on board, which is what he did. And, you know, he had said during the thing that he didn't think about it. He didn't think about it. He didn't think about it. Well, you know, Michael, that borderlines on telepathic manipulation or control. That is not something a benevolent ever does. They always leave you with free will to say yes or no. And once again, he was able to ask the question, you know, who are you? Where are you from? And again, no response. Now, let's leave that there for a minute. Prior to the shamans, the South American shamans going on board the Ark in the Atlantic, it's my understanding that when they did the chanting, they opened the Ark. Is that right?
They chanted, and that activated interior portions of the Ark that they were able to penetrate, and others would then, you know, were or were not able to follow, depending on where they were.
Okay. So, Michael, how come the Nordics didn't have an ability or a way to access the Ark?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I mean, in his latest update, I mean, he is saying that the Nordics have been able to activate some aspects of the Ark, but not others, and they needed the Aztec Indians. So, yeah, it seems that they
The
can.
boats are not theirs. The boats are not theirs. Why are they taking control of them?
Well, according to what JP was told, well, I mean, you've got what the Nordics are telling him, and what he is learning from the Navy people running the kind of Ark operations, that the Arks are moving, and there's something about the Ark's mission and what the Navy and the different multinational countries that are trying to board the Arks and exploit the technologies there, that something isn't going right. And so a decision was made. Now, I'm not sure who made that decision, because the Arks seem to have some kind of intelligence themselves. So the Arks began to move. I don't know if that was because the Nordics decided to move them, or something within the Arks perceived that humanity's consciousness, or at least the consciousness of the multinational alliance, was not quite right. And so, according to JP, that's what he says, that led to the Arks going into the kind of middle of the Atlantic and moving from Bermuda, which I assume is probably more under US jurisdiction, and moving it more into like international waters, where it can be more of a multinational effort than what it was. And he said something about the worshipping, that the humans were worshipping the Ark. So I translate that as being that the military were like thinking that the Ark technologies were going to be some kind of game changer, and really, doing everything they could to get access and to extract them.
Personally, I think that's a bullshit story. I think it's a cover story. I think the Nordics are from here, which is why they won't answer the question, who are they? I think they're hybrids. I think they're hybrid Nordics. They're from Earth. They live somewhere probably near one of the polar openings or other places on the planet. The Earth has many, many secrets. And if, both Elena and I independently have gotten that the regressives are gone, but there is a group of hybrids that are here that haven't been removed yet. I personally believe that that's who these beings are. And if they are taking control of the arcs, they're going to use that as leverage to not leave, to negotiate terms with the alliance so they don't have to leave. Because they're from Earth. They have to be from Earth. They will not answer the question, where are they from? If they were to say, well, we're from here, that would be a game changer. But that's not what they're doing. All right? They did not have control of the arcs or access to the arcs until the Aztecs walked in there and did their chanting and opened it up, whatever it is that they did. So they did not have control. But now they have it. Now they're taking it. At least that's what they told JP. There's something wrong here, Michael. And a friend of mine who is also a contactee, you don't know her yet, but I'm sure you will. Her contact, who's a male, told her straight away, because she listened to JP's last update with you, and he told her straight away, they're not with us. He's Alliance. He said that these Nordics were not with us, which only can conclude, if that's accurate, that this group is the rogue group that both Elena and I individually and separately from different sources had been told have not been removed yet. So to strengthen their position, they now have control of the arcs and the technology that's on it.
Well, I know JP has said that several of his missions have involved meeting groups of inner Earth Nordics. So there are Nordics who have bases here that have been here for a long time.
Right.
Now, as to whether they're hybrids or not, I mean, I don't know what that could mean in the context of because there are Nordics that have been here for a long time that have their own agenda, their own technologies, their own histories. That would make sense that JP, because I remember back in 2008, when I first started talking to him, he did. I mean, what was very strange was that the Nordics never revealed where they were from, and he was very kind of like almost not interested in pushing them on where they're from. So it's quite possible that they're an inner Earth species, an inner Earth group of Nordics that. Well, I don't know whether you want to say they're taking charge or whether they're just kind of like trying to help the process.
Those were JP's words. Those were JP's words. They're taking control of the Arks. That's what he said. And that's what they supposedly told him. And they're not their boats, Michael. They are not their boats.
Well, I don't know exactly what it means that they're taking control of the arcs. I mean, that Atlantic Ark moved, and apparently there was something between the Ark, the Nordics, and the military that led to that happening. Now, you're talking about the update I did today with JP, where he talks about all the arcs all over the world getting under the control of the Nordics.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think that is a fair question. Are those Nordics inner Earth beings? Because, yeah, exactly. JP has never said where they're from. He was never told where they're from. He says he's asked them, and they haven't kind of like clarified that. So
the other thing that bothers me too is that they keep saying, this same group apparently, that we're going to have to live on the Arks in space. Now, I don't know how many there are. I don't know how big they are, but I don't necessarily believe that they can comfortably fit 8 billion people or whatever that number is actually going to be. So my question number one is, why do we have to leave the planet? Where would we be going? They never say where they were going. And we know there are other E-type planets out there that we could inhabit. But they never say. They never give us information regarding that. The other factor too is this is the only home we know. So why is it we're the ones who have to leave? Now, what's interesting is that Elena's group and the A's, the Andromedans, they have actually stressed that we should petition councils for us to be granted this planet as our home world. And yet here you have the Nordic saying, well, you got to leave. You just have to leave. You got to go live in these arcs. That just, and they won't even identify who they are. They're just not, it's not right. I think we're being played, quite frankly, and I know Elena has shared some concerns with you. I have, I'm voicing it now. I'll probably have more after I talk to Mornay officially about this. But there are several other contactees that have begun to share information with me, and they're also alarmed by this move by the Nordics, whoever they truly are. I would be very careful about saying that this is a good thing because we don't know this. It could very well be that they're going to use the boats against us as leverage in order to get what they want. These beings have been here for a very, very long time, and they have stood back and watched as the place has gone to hell. They have stood back and watched as the Orion group and others have come in here and just ransacked humanity, over the coals, over and over and over and over again. I'm not okay with that. Especially they're here. It's like the Venetians. Where the hell have they been all this time? They're our next door neighbors. It's just like, well, we don't want to get involved. Who cares about the Earthlings? Well, telling us that we're going to have to get on these boats and live in space and leave the only world we've ever known is basically like, well, we don't care what you think. We just want you out of here. And I'm not okay with that. I'm absolutely not okay with that.
Yeah, well, that is one of the elements of JP's information that he's been pretty consistent with since I've known him, that the arks were something that would be used in the future for hosting a certain proportion of humanity to escape some calamity, and he would be on it. That would be his mission. And when he first told me that, I felt that was very odd, and I resisted that because I was like, well, we're not here to just kind of preside humanity's evacuation onto space arks. I mean, that, to me, that's not what this is all about. But that was the mission, or that was what he was revealing earlier on. So this does raise the question.
The tech exists. The tech exists to manage a pole ship very slowly so that the seabeds do not leave their beds. That's number one. Two, the tech exists, and all of this is already in our solar system to keep us from getting hit by a maximum solar wave or ELF. That technology already exists. In fact, they've even demonstrated those ships on the SOHO satellites, where they would put up a shield and you would see a microburst from the sun go around it. Okay, so they've already demonstrated that. Then, of course, there's Nibiru, all right, or Hercupolis, the dwarf star. That's another issue, okay? When it does come through, it does stir up trouble. However, there are ways to minimize the atmosphere or the gravitational field of Hercupolis as it passes through the solar system. So, there's all this tech that doesn't say we have to leave. There's all this tech and other groups that say, no, this is not what you're doing. This is not your destiny. I simply don't get why this is the narrative. It's just like the Orion group coming down here at what is now known as Edwards Air Force Base and showing the videos of Christ's crucifixion and then sharing all this other information with the generals and other people that were there, including Eisenhower. A lot of that turned out not to be true, what they shared. But what it was, Michael, was they told them what they wanted to hear. So I'm wondering, since the Nordics are not freely sharing anything about themselves, that we are basically in the same situation. Maybe not at the same level, but, this smells to high heaven. This absolutely smells to high heaven. And, who the hell is worshiping the arks? They're spaceships. That's all they are. Boats. Every planet, every seafaring planet has a navy. And that's what these are. These are navy boats, starships. So there's just something wrong here. And what really tipped me off was the way that JP got out of his car, leaving it completely unattended on a highway, keys in it, unlocked with all his gear. He just walks into the woods, leaving the car. He had to have been under some kind of control, and that's a manipulation. That is a manipulation. He even says himself he didn't question anything. It's because he wasn't giving the right to question anything.
Okay, I think there's now that incident leaving the car. I think that was the one with Jasif. That was the previous.
It was the one he said he didn't know who he was. He didn't tell him who he was. He didn't have a name for him, and he never met him. It's the previous one from today.
Yeah, that was with
Yeah.
Jasif. He mentioned the name Jasif. That was with that one. Whereas the one with the Ark, I mean, the one that he just did, I mean, that was with a team of guys, as I recall.
Okay, well, I'm not referring to that one. I'm referring to the first one.
Yeah, to the previous one, yeah.
Leaving it completely unsecure with his weapon and everything else, more than likely in the car or in the trunk. And the door opened, and when he gets back to the car, there's a deputy sheriff or, somebody behind his car.
Right, yeah.
Dude, what's up? That is not something a trained spec officer does.
Well, he's, to be fair, he's not a special operator. He's been given some training as like parachute training, some medical training to accompany special operators. I mean, his military occupation specialty is like a chemical equipment repairer. That's what he's trained in.
Okay, I hear your scholarly knowledge there, but this is a young man who is going on starships, extraterrestrial vehicles, or underground military extraterrestrial bases, meeting with extraterrestrials face to face and looking and removing their equipment. This is all special ops. Okay, there is no other word for it. Okay.
Yeah, those are special operations. Alex, I mean, from the very beginning when JP's been describing these missions, he's described meeting with Nordics. He's described meeting with military operators. And they were all, one of the things that really puzzled me was that they were all very uncommunicative with him. They never said where they're from. They never said anything about the details of the mission. They just said, watch. That's it. Just watch. That was all he was ever told, either by the covert military or by the Nordics. Just watch. That's all he was ever told. And that was very frustrating for me, interviewing him over the years, that these people were taking him on these missions and never gave him details, never answered his questions. So I don't know if that's just, they just did a psychological profile of him and decided that, well, this is a guy that we're just going to put in these different places and he's going to look at these things and then he's going to talk about them and that's it. And he doesn't get many details about anything. It's just a hodgepodge of experiences being taken to different places, and it's only with hindsight when I look at what's been happening, it's like, oh, okay, they've been exposing him to these different things. But JP, I think he's more like an experiencer who's been co-opted into the military because he's been working with the Nordics and they have agreements with the Air Force.
Which part of the Air Force?
That's a good question. He's described that part of the Air Force which is involved in these covert operations dealing with the space technologies, learning about the different technologies that either the ETs have supplied or that they've found in different kind of ancient locations. So, and one of the missions he described was where he went to a joint Air Force Navy facility and that they were training both Navy personnel and Air Force personnel in the use of some of the ET technologies. So, and this is like, again, no name for who the Nordics are, just that, they're Nordics, that they have agreements with the Air Force, the Navy as well. They're sharing technologies, they're training Navy and Air Force personnel in using these advanced technologies. Some of them are weapons technologies. And you can understand why the Air Force is interested in those as well as the Navy.
Yeah. No, I get that. It's just, we've had, human likes from Orion posing as Nordics, Aldebaran posing as Nordics, as Nordics, and we've had other races from different parts posing as Nordics. We've even had Nordics on board with the Greys, behind, watching these things going on to Earthlings being tortured and babies being drawn out, et cetera, and other nefarious things that have been going on. And I just, there's just something not right. There's just something that's not right here. And I felt like I needed to share it. I would like to be proven wrong. But anytime I ignore my gut, it always turns out to be right.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well,
pieces of this make no sense, especially when you have two other evolved fifth dimensional star groups sharing a completely different outcome for humanity.
it is very puzzling. I know that there's, of course, the white hats, or probably a better word would be the Earth Alliance. And of course, we know that the Earth Alliance involves these military personnel that are cooperating to bring about a better world. And we know that you've got your deep state that is doing the opposite, and they also have military personnel. So I think, to be fair, I mean, if you're part of a Nordic inner Earth civilization and you're looking at what's happening on the surface of the planet, you say, okay, the humans, they kind of still haven't got their act together. There's still some hoops that they have to jump through. There are these space arks there that have all these advanced technologies. So we're going to facilitate, or we're going to take control for a while to activate these things. And I think of the example that JP gave of the jewel that was taken from the ark, one of the arks. That it was taken from one of the arks. He said the mission was it felt like 2 hours, but when they went back, they were told they were gone for 2 days. And then he had vivid memories or dreams that during that 2 days there were Nordics on the craft. But they took the jewel, they gave it to the kind of Earth Alliance, or to the Navy, and apparently that jewel was then taken to different places to activate certain technologies. And then it was brought back, and JP described that other mission of returning back with it. And that was a joint Nordic and human mission. So, I mean, looking at that, I would say that this group of Nordics are probably trying to handle a really difficult situation. I mean, you look at our planet at the moment. I mean, we're in a bad place if you look at it on the surface. Now, behind the scenes, a lot of good things are happening. But when you look at what's happening right now, I mean, it's like the deep state is going to play its big cards, whether it's going to be another war in the Middle East, the Gog and Magog war. I mean, Ukraine is winding down. They're talking about major attacks in US cities. So I think maybe the Nordics are looking at all this and saying that, okay, we've got to step in and take control of these arks for a little while until the surface humans get their act together. But the bottom line, I think you're probably right that because this group has not identified itself, maybe they are an inner Earth civilization.
Okay, now let's just take what you just said and take that apart for a minute. All really good points. Now, if they were so concerned about what was happening on the surface, why would they allow us to go and open up the arks and begin to take technology off them in the first place? My hypothesis is that they couldn't get into those arks themselves. They needed us. And the cover story was that they needed us to get into those and open them up so they themselves could get in and get maybe records, files of things that are in there, genetic material of some sort. It could be a zillion reasons why they had to get in, but they could not get in without us.
I don't know about that. I mean, JP, in all his missions, I mean, it's only the last few missions he's described where the Nordics were involved. Like he described returning the jewel, and he said that was a joint mission between kind of like special operators, human special operators, and the Nordics. That was a joint mission going into the Ark. But when the jewel was taken out, and he had that missing time experience, there were Nordics already in there. So I don't know if it would be fair to say that this group of Nordics needed us to get access to the Arks, because I know going back to 2014, 2015, when JP was telling me about his experiences on these huge domes, he was saying that it was always a bit hazy in terms of who was actually taking him there, but he did describe the Nordics taking him there on several occasions. So I suspect that maybe he's a key. Maybe he's one of the keys, and maybe they are looking for the keys, people like him that can activate the arcs. Maybe that's what they're doing. Maybe they understand that maybe as an inner Earth civilization themselves, that they're not the crew of these arcs, so they have to find the crew, and they found JP, and he's a key, so that gives them access. So that would make sense. Well, I mean, maybe we should get to this kind of idea of this timeline. I mean, one of the things that comes up again and again with JP is a future where a significant proportion of humanity is living on the Space Arks. Now, I don't like that. I don't support that, but I can't ignore that. That's what he says he saw, and that this particular group of Nordics, or actually multiple groups of Nordics, are helping with these different, I guess, time travel, or looking at future scenarios, looking at what's going to happen. I think 2050 was one scenario, 100 years in the future was another scenario, and I think from 2075 was another timeline. So it's like he's saying that the Nordics are helping the militaries look at these future possibilities, and then they're trying to work out how to, I guess, avoid those possibilities. I mean, that seems to be the goal, is to show, okay, if things continue in their present circumstances, this is what's going to happen, and so this is what you need to do to avoid that. That would be my guess, why the military would be doing that.
Well, that's what Looking Glass was all about, and what we all do now understand, and I'm sure they know, is consciousness, using consciousness to create the future that you want. Now, we all know that we've been living in a matrix, in a completely false reality that has been created for us. So, why not come forward and help us tear that down, and then educate us to the true history of humanity, and so on and so forth, to change the outcome of Earth's future, if that's a real thing, and help humanity consciously get to that place where we can create a different future. Why not do that? I mean, we're not stupid. We are incredibly resilient people on this planet. We figure stuff out. We reverse engineer very, very well. What we don't have is an understanding of who we are, because all that's been hidden from us and wiped away by other extraterrestrial groups. So I don't understand why they don't want to come forward if they're already here and share that knowledge with us.
Well, I guess if we're talking about an inner Earth civilization that are Nordic looking, with the similar technologies to the Nordics,
we don't know who they are. We don't know who they are.
Well, we know, how they behave, and we know a little bit about their craft and how they interact with JP, at least. That group, just that particular group.
Okay, but we don't know what their true intent is, Michael, because we don't know them.
That's true. All we know is that they're exposing JP to a lot of situations without giving him details.
Yeah, and it's wearing on him physically and emotionally.
Yeah, I think what he described in his last update was more the kind of level of harassment and the kind of targeting that he's been exposed to from the deep state people. That the deep state are looking at what JP's being exposed to, because he's been given all these experiences. The Nordics are taking him to places and exposing him to things. The covert military, the Air Force people are taking him to places, exposing him to things. So he's seeing all these things, and he's not really given a lot of details. He's just kind of like put in a position to see things. Then he comes back and reports on those things. And what was very clear early on to me was that there was a group, a faction tied with the CIA that did not want that to happen, that wanted to stop that. They harassed him, they intimidated him, he was threatened, and more recently he's been attacked with directed energy weapons and been put into hospital 3 times now.
Yeah.
And there was also an attack on his daughter as well that was contrived. So he's experiencing all this harassment, and also, he was forced to take the jab, and that's taken a toll on his health as well. Because he didn't want to take it, but he had to take it if he wanted to continue in the military. So that's another thing that's impacted his health. So overall, he's starting to experience very severe health issues. I mean, he's only in his 30s, but he's saying that it's like he's got a body of like someone in his 50s in terms of health issues, and it's taken its toll. And he's saying that he wants it to stop. So I think he's focusing more on the kind of like military treatment he's been getting, or maybe not so much the military treatment. It's more these attacks against him. And he did say that in that the prior mission, the one where he went with Jasif, that he was given this blue liquid to drink. He said that liquid helped him a lot, helped him feel better. He said he felt lucid again. He felt like inventing things again. So I think whatever that liquid, he didn't know what it was, but he just drank it. Maybe it was, I don't know, compulsion, whatever. But it did make him feel better. But his experiences with the military have not been very positive. I know there are a covert group of the military that wants him to be there, wants him to reveal where he's being taken to and all of that. But by and large, he's not being treated well by the army, because the regular branch of the army, they treat him like crap. They really do.
Yeah, I've had that conversation with him.
Yeah,
I'm well aware of that. All right, so let's talk about the deep state. We know that Solar Warden, and we know that Safari, that there are literally 2 space platforms, 2 space programs, okay, with very different intentions, although the technology is virtually the same, because the same contractors made the technology, because they were handed the technology from crash retrievals. I also know we had a brief conversation about this the other day, about the stalemate that exists between both space programs. Because essentially they can both take each other out because they're virtually the same. So here you have the Nordics intervening and doing missions, and at the same time, they're going to stand back and just wait and see how this all plays out. Why don't they just show themselves and end the stalemate? Just take both sides completely out of it for now, so that neither can leverage the other with disclosure.
Yeah, well,
See, these are all things that, I would be right up front with them and say, what are you doing? What is your logical thinking about not doing this or doing that? How can you intervene here but not there? What is the difference between the two things? If you think we're going to have to live on arcs because something happens to the planet because we don't have our act together yet, when we're just waking up from being in a coma, thanks to other groups that were here and doing that to us, then why aren't you intervening more to assist us and help us wake up faster? Especially when that consciousness is the key. It doesn't make sense to me, Michael. There's a piece here, a huge piece that's missing, and it's on their end. It's definitely on their end.
Well, we can make the same argument for any of the kind of like extraterrestrial groups that are visiting us, whether we're talking about Nordics from the inner Earth, whether we're talking about Pleiadians, whether we're talking about the Galactic Federation,
Sure.
Ashtar Command. You can make the same argument. And I think probably the answer is going to be very similar, that at the moment, Earth is going through some kind of internal awakening and struggle. And maybe it is just like the birth pangs of a new civilization, where there's going to be a bit of pain, but at the end of the day, something good is going to emerge. But right now, as you said, the deep state and the Earth Alliance are locked in this struggle, and what we're witnessing is that they're neutralizing one another. That that whatever false flag operations the deep state plans to do, they're kind of like neutralized or exposed by the Earth Alliance, and whatever kind of positive initiatives that the Earth Alliance has, maybe this UAP Disclosure Act is an example of that. I don't know. That's something we could talk about, but that was neutralized as well. So if both the deep state and the Earth Alliance have similar technologies and they're neutralizing themselves, but yet the collective consciousness is rising because people are, learning of all the secrets, I think at the end of the day, the positive side is going to win. That's what you've been saying. It's what Elena's been saying.
Yes,
I agree. I think that's exactly what's going to happen.
Okay, I do too. However, you have the Nordics telling JP, we're going to have to live in space arcs. That's predictive programming. Why are they saying that when they don't really know what the outcome is?
Now, that's... I wouldn't say they're telling him we're going to be living on space arcs. What they did was, back in 2014, 2015, they told him that in the future there would be a portion of humanity living on the space arcs. Yeah,
right. Okay.
That's what he was told then, but that was in 2014, 2015. That was during the Obama administration, and I think the timelines at that time maybe were not so good. But now, more recently, he's been kind of like saying that the Nordics are trying to help activate these arcs so that they can appear. And then what happens after that, it's anyone's bet. Whether these are going to be used for just kickstarting a new civilization. I mean, that's what Elena has been saying, that in the past, the space arcs were used to kind of start a new civilization. So could that be...
They came to planets that were not inhabited, and everything that was built around the technology of the arcs. It only makes sense. Yeah, and we would be starting, in essence, over again in that way. I get that, but the arcs are not the Nordics. They belong to the people.
Well, that's a good question. Who do the arcs belong to? I guess, if we follow what Elena has said, that the arcs were first built by the Seeders, and there's 24 different extraterrestrial or intergalactic extraterrestrial groups associated with the Seeders, and each one, when they created a civilization on Earth, built it around an arc. So they dumped the mothership there. Like the best example is maybe the Alteans. They kind of left an arc like this Atlantic arc. They left this Atlantic arc somewhere there in the Atlantic Ocean, and around that arc you had the Atlantean civilization being built. And prior to that, there'd been 23 other, or something like that, close to 20. I think Eleanor said I think she said it was 22 rather than 24. So something like that. So there were probably 22 space arcs around that were used for similar things. And the thing is, at this point in our collective history, rather than us going through a cataclysmic series of events where our civilization implodes and the arcs are used for evacuation purposes, which has happened many times in the past, that it looks like our civilization is going to continue. Maybe it'll change in some way. Maybe it'll become a more genuine global civilization. And what role the arcs are going to play in that, I'm guessing, maybe I assume it'll be to help kickstart that with the new tech. That's what JP's been saying more recently, that the technologies from the arc, or from the Atlantic arc, was being used to kind of like activate other ancient technologies. So I think that's a possibility that seems to be happening. So yeah, I wouldn't say that the message from JP's Nordics is that your planet is going to eventually all have to live on the arcs and get used to it. I think that was something they told him that would be something he would be doing, but I don't know if that applies to all of us.
Okay. Well, you did say a majority of humanity would be living on the arcs.
That was one of the missions he described. Well, he was taken into the future, 100 years into the future. I think that's in the first volume of JP's US Army Insider Missions. And in that chapter, he's taken 100 years into the future. And yeah, in that situation, the majority of humanity is living on the space arcs in that particular future. Now, I think the point, though, that he's made is that the Nordics are helping the kind of Earth Alliance to understand all these different future scenarios and to make whatever steps. So that's, to me, I interpret that as being one scenario that could happen if say bad choices are made. But that's just one. Maybe there are many other scenarios. Maybe Earth continues and the space arcs will evacuate, or maybe some people will choose to go on the space arcs to colonize another world. That I'm not sure how the space arcs can be used. I'm just guessing, because the thing about JP and his missions, he's like just looking at things and trying to describe what he's seen, but he has no details.
He's a casual observer. He's a
Exactly.
casual observer.
Well,
Okay.
let me ask you. Let me ask you then, because I know this is something that you have. You've proposed that there multiple timeline. There's only one timeline now.
Yes.
So, how does that play out in terms of this ongoing struggle between the deep state and the Earth Alliance? If it's the one timeline, does that just mean that we are going to be moving in this direction where both sides neutralize each other, and at the end of the day, humanity kind of like awakens? We're like the eggshell that bursts. We awaken and we're out there, strutting around. We're free, or we're awake, and whatever. Or is there, or is something else going on here? We look at the Mandela effect, for example. People are talking about an increasing Mandela effect. So that suggests someone is trying to screw with the timeline.
Or you still have the two primary timelines merging with each other, and whichever, how do I put this? Whichever outcome has the highest vibration for humanity is the one that survives. Okay? At least that's how it's been explained to me. And as far as the deep state and these and Solar Warden, or the Space Force, etc., the White Hats, just to keep the conversation simple. The solution to me is very simple, and this is exactly how it's been explained to me. The deep state does not have any spaceports. Once those spaceports are shut down, and they have absolutely no access to a spaceport, they're basically screwed, because they're not going to be allowed to leave the solar system. The place is locked down already. That's why this is where all the action is on the surface and in our atmosphere. Now, they monitor the crew's chains of thought, so they know who has a positive intention and who does not. Now, the deep state is in a great deal of fear right now, because they've virtually lost all their power, their authority, their ability to manipulate, to control, to do whatever the hell they want. Now, once those spaceports are completely closed off to them, and I believe there's one or two still on the surface. One, I think, is still connected to Australia, but I do not know where the other one. It may be Argentina, frankly. What were those islands that off the coast of Argentina?
Falkland?
That's it. There was one very deep in the Falkland Islands. Once those are closed off to them, they have nowhere to go. And because the monetary system is changing, they will have no ability to use what they've already stolen. None whatsoever. So eventually how this thing will play out is they will eventually have to surrender or transition themselves out of our existence. That's how it's been explained to me. So they're already being backed into a corner. Now we're talking about backing them into a box.
Mm-hmm.
So they can't do any harm. Meanwhile, we have the positive space fleet. On the surface, they'll be training a whole new several generations of pilots to fly anti-gravity devices, which we can already mass produce. And of course, we have the alliance groups that are here to help us, not only on some on third, but fourth and fifth. So, I mean, to me, the future looks extremely bright. And, and this is why I had to ask, exactly who are the Nordics, or at least this group? They're asking us to trust them with all this stuff, and yet they won't even tell us where they're from. I mean, that's a simple question. It's a very simple question, unless you're from Earth. And then the question raises, well, where the hell have you been? With all this technology, where have you been? Why have you let this place go to hell in a handbasket? Do you feel nothing for us or what? I mean, seriously, these are questions I would have asked right off the get-go.
Well, I mean, this raises a kind of historical question, is that, I mean, many people that have described Atlantis, I mean, Edgar Cayce described a similar dynamic to what we're seeing today. You had your white hats, and you had your, the sons of Belial, or the deep state, the Atlantean deep state. And of course, back then, I think that the Atlanteans, they had made contact with the Galactics, and the Galactics were helping them. I think they were getting a lot of assistance, but still, the deep state, these sons of Belial, were able to sabotage Atlantis and arrange for it to kind of implode as a global civilization. So I suspect that inner Earth beings have watched surface humanity go through cycles of this, and maybe they figure that, well, the best way of handling this is to kind of be hands off, but and maybe doing it in the way they're doing it with JP. This particular Nordic group, that they know the history, they know that Earth has gone through cycles where this deep state, these sons of Belial, the Satanists, will turn anything. You get Nordics showing up, of good faith, wanting to help, and the deep state will turn that around. They're here to exploit us. They're here to kind of serve us up as a meal. So they know that just revealing themselves will be twisted. Whatever positive motivation you have, that the deep state will twist that. So maybe they figure the best way to do it is to be kind of vague and standoffish, using people like JP to okay, this is what's going on, and just place them there to raise awareness, because that's what JP's doing. I think he's being exposed to a lot of things, raising awareness, and people are talking, and it's well, is he really having these experiences? I think he is. I believe he is.
I think he is too.
Yeah, so he's having these experiences, and then we're trying to figure out, well, why are they allowing him to do this? Why aren't they intervening more? Why don't they reveal details of where they are? But I think your guess is probably a good one. I think that would be right, that they are probably an inner Earth group that are kind of and I don't even know that from memory whether they've actually even described themselves as Nordics to JP. I think they just meet him, talk to him, and he's described them to me as Nordics, and we always, I guess, assume that they were from off planet, but they've never said anything about themselves being off planet, within the Earth, or anything like that. They just expose him to things, and at most they ever do is maybe just say their name. But even that, I think the previous update to the one that just came out, I think that's the first time, as I recall, that one of these Nordics have revealed their names. So that was unusual. So Alex, I think if this is a surface group if this is an inner Earth civilization that JP is calling the Nordics, then they've been around the block many times. They've probably seen what's happened on the surface, and they've decided that this is the best way to just take this hands-off, standoffish approach. Don't reveal too much information, and just because I think your point about the Black Hats and the Earth Alliance being in a kind of a static in a stalemate, that's probably correct. And so that means that this inner Earth civilization probably see this as the time to raise the consciousness of humanity And to do that, you have people like JP get exposed to a lot of situations.
Okay. I know we'll revisit this again someday.
Well, I mean, we're just trying to get more information. But, while we're on this topic, I know there are people, and I think it's fair enough. Well, I don't know if you want to name them. I mean, maybe if you want to. But there are people out there putting out a kind of much more of a doom and gloom cataclysmic future that's coming our way. And they're talking about AI. They're really hyping up the AI element, saying that the AI element is going to take us down this very dark path as a planet. So where do you stand on that? The whole AI thing and the future of humanity.
Well, I honestly, I don't think, all advanced civilizations use some form of AI. This we know. For guidance and ship maintenance, there are mining vessels in the rings of Saturn that use AI and robots to manage the equipment. And, these ships have been here 10, 15, 20,000 years, and they still operate, in the rings of Saturn. I think it's the A ring and the B ring. So do I think it's all doom and gloom? No, but, Billy Meyer in the 70s came out, and the Pleiadians / Pelagians now it's mentioned that AI was going to take over the planet and the weapon systems would all be turned over to AI and that they were going to turn on humanity. I don't believe that's our future whatsoever anymore. I don't believe we're even on that kind of a timeline. We're just not. And, with the technology that we now have, TR3s, TR4s, TR8s and 9s, and other reverse engineered craft, we could very easily shoot down all those systems. So I don't, and I tell my people during the webinars, don't buy into the fear porn. What they want is your attention, because it's all intent, it's all energy. If you focus your attention on the doom and gloom, what you've just done is you have changed the frequency of your field. And what you've also done is you lowered your frequency. And what you're doing is now you're feeding an intent, a focused intent that someone else has. All right. If that's not what you want, why would you focus any energy on what it is you don't want? Instead of focusing all your energy on what you do want. That's all you should be paying attention to, is what you do want. Because that's what you're creating every minute of every day, is what you want. And that's where your focus should be. And that's all part of the enlightening process we're going through. The more people get empowered to do those things and to remember to do it every day themselves, to just focus on what I want. If they do that, then we will literally create what we really want. And it isn't the fear porn. It's not the doom and gloom. It is not the end of the world. It is not the book of Revelations. That was someone else's idea. That was not our idea. All right? And I'm just going to say this. The gods in the Bible are extraterrestrials. They are not the creator of dimensions. No how, no way. And you need to give that a second look. And if you don't know, read Mario Baglino's books, 10 Years as a Vatican archivist who transcribed the ancient texts. And he clearly spells it out for you, how those books were manipulated by the writers of ancient Rome, mostly the Caesars and then the popes, to create this narrative. So the fact of the matter is, collectively and consciously, we as a humanity can create any future we want. All you have to do is decide what you want. It's not rocket science. It never has been. But they made it look like it's rocket science. And they made us look really stupid and weak that we were not capable of doing it. When the fact is, we're quite clever. We're actually very, very strong. And, you know, we have had the shit kicked out of us over and over and over again. 1,000 generations have been put through the mill with these interfering, meddling, other regressive extraterrestrial groups, and we're still here. Okay? And I think you need to remember that, guys. You do.
Well, while we're on the subject of AI, I just wanted to get your opinion, or whatever you were told by the Andromedans, on the use of AI in their ships. I know there was a TV series based on Gene Roddenberry's idea called Andromeda. I don't know if you ever saw episodes from that. It was kind of like, it wasn't a very good series, but it showed a ship that had this organic consciousness that interacted with the crew. So is that actually accurate for the way advanced ETs incorporate AI onto their ships, that the ship becomes like an organic consciousness?
Yeah, it becomes an extension of the crew. That's how it's set up and designed. When they build their ships, there is AI used, a different type of AI. Now we're talking fifth density consciousness here, just to give you a perspective. They use AI to build the craft. When the ship is ready to be manned, each crew member will go underneath the ship. They will place their hands on a plate that's removed after they've done this. They will place their hands on this plate, and frequency moves through the crew member into the ship, into the entire ship. All right? And then another crew member, and then another crew member. When they lose a crew member and they need another crew member, then what they do is they go back to home port or to a larger mothership, and what they do is they reattach the plate and they add a new crew member doing exactly the same thing. So each crew member's DNA, internal frequency, and consciousness is literally become part of the ship, which is why we have ships on the surface that we can't get into, because these are coded only to the frequency, the bio frequency, and the DNA of each of the crew members. So they will put their hands somewhere on a plate near an entrance, and the AI will recognize them as a member, as part of the ship, and the door will open. If it does not have your frequency, if it doesn't know your frequency, there's no way to get in. You're just not going to get in. And the way that they build it, the way that they have defense mechanisms, shields that they can put up. A very good one is the one that's in the cave in Afghanistan, which is still there. They still can't get into it, and they still can't get near it. That's because its defense shields are on. You know, if there was a crew member who walked in there, that would be a very different story. He wouldn't get zapped or disappeared, okay? Because that's what the ship knows, and most of them are like that. Most of those ships are like that. You cannot hijack a starship, you know, unless you open it up for someone else and you bring them in with you, and then you leave and they're still in the ship. Then there's a possibility that you can hijack it. Okay.
And that sounds to be very similar technology to the Arks, that the Arks have some kind of AI or organic consciousness that is making decisions.
Yeah, they weren't built on Earth.
Right. So
yeah,
they have
the same technology for sure.
Right. Okay.
That's why they're larger on the inside, you know, just for that very reason.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the topics that continues to get a lot of attention is the return of the Anunnaki, and of course, there's a lot of debate over that. And I just wanted to get the perspective of the Andromedans. When did the Andromedans first come across the Anunnaki? I know that you had the whole Lyran Wars with the Draco and all of that, and there were a lot of refugees fleeing. So, at what point, how do the Andromedans fit into that picture, and where do the Anunnaki come in?
Michael, that's a really interesting question. Mornay and the late Phaseus, they're fifth density. So I don't know how much interaction they've had with a fourth dimensional Anunnaki group. Elena has implied a fifth dimensional Anunnaki group, but I'm not familiar with it. So I can't say whether or not that, who they are and if the A's interact with it. But the A's have talked a great deal about the fourth dimensional group that moves in and out of third density all the time and has that ability. These packages that you see here, that bag that he's holding in his hand, when you look at them, they're always carrying something like that, or they're wearing it on their belt. That gives them the ability to stand and move around in our atmosphere. That package, that equipment, its technology, gives them the ability to move in and out of different atmospheres and to breathe, to exist. The A's technology is just a belt. They wear it around their belt, and it automatically will adjust to the life form, depending upon the atmosphere one is in. Going back into history of the human race, when they were first made aware that there was an issue. Boy, I haven't revisited this in a long, long time. They were aware that soul groups, not only from fifth, but from other dimensions above fifth, were trapped on Earth. And this is where you have the reincarnational cycle trap and the capture and reintegrate, capture, reintegrate of the souls. And apparently it was brought to their attention by beings in other realms above them, because they're mentored by beings in sixth. That's how it works. And sixth is mentored by seven. So everyone's always playing it forward. Well, that's how they were told about what was going on in our part of the galaxy. And they decided to check it out, to see what was going on. And when they realized that there were many Andromedans trapped in these cycles as well, it became an issue. Because the issue was, there have been civilizations out there that have tried to jump into another level of consciousness and physicality. But they could never do it collectively together. There were some that would go, but some that could not move forward. And the reason they couldn't move forward is because they were attached, spiritually attached to the Andromedans captured in some other realm. So the idea was put together about, well, what do we do? How do we fix this? A plan. They were working on a plan to figure out, well, how could we correct this? And what would be the best way to do it? And that's what brought them here in the first place, was to look at the options, to look at what was going on. And then, of course, when they actually got here and they talked to those in third and fourth, and then they moved in and talked to the benevolence in third, they realized, oh, the Orion group, they're legendary for their shit. And then, of course, you have the reptilian race, which, plays hard and fast. It doesn't matter who you are. So that's when they began the process of interacting with other fourth dimensional races, and even employing some other fifth dimensional races to come in here to help us resolve this issue, because the soul groups affect virtually most of the star systems on all the dimensions. So in order for us all to jump from our respective dimension into a next higher, this had to be fixed. This had to be resolved. It's almost as if everything was anchored here, and it was being anchored by a black hole of spiritual imprisonment. They had enough consciousness from each of these different races to hold it back from evolving to another level. And it was once said to me that the Orion group knew exactly what they were doing, and they were using it as leverage. They were using it as leverage against all the other star nations. A form of blackmail, for lack of a better word, to get what they wanted, to get concessions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And everybody was done with it because they're like a cancer. They were like a cancer. It was just spreading. And they were never going to do an about face. They were never going to move into logic and reason or compassion. That's just simply not who they were at this point anymore on any consciousness level. And how they knew that was by the younger generations that were growing up in the Orion system, or many Orion systems, maybe not all of them, and especially in the Alpha Draconis system. They were being born without emotion, none whatsoever. And they realized that at that point, they simply had to intervene. So a very dramatic strategic operation went into effect that involved a lot of time travel back and forth, to create very specific scenarios to literally chip away at the foundation of their manipulation and their blackmail and their imprisonment of souls, and realizing that the thing about the Orion group is that they never trusted anyone, especially even their own. So there was a very, very small group that actually was maintaining and controlling the whole thing. So once they realized if they could overwhelm them and turn their focus away from control and manipulation to trying to mend the damage that the White Hats, for lack of a better word, or the Andromedan Alliance was chipping away at the foundation of their power, they would have to move, and they would have to turn their attention away. And that's when it all happened. That's when their empire began to completely collapse on top of itself. And that's when we began to wake up. We began to see things differently. We began to experience things differently. People started calling out, and that's when outside intervention began to occur. More contacts, more aerial displays, just all kinds of things across the board began to manifest themselves because their hold over our consciousness relaxed. And it didn't take much for us to spring out of it. We were already longing for something different. We're infinite souls. We know what joy is. We know what happiness is. We know what love is. So the minute we saw an opportunity, we just instinctively took it. And it set off a chain reaction. So that's the Cliff Notes version of it, frankly.
Okay, fair enough. So I know there's a lot of people that are concerned about the return of the Anunnaki, and they don't distinguish between a positive faction and a negative faction. And Enlil was the one that did all of the shenanigans, or Hugh, as his kind of Anunnaki name is, and Enki or Ea was playing the positive role. But so on that distinction, I think you would agree that that's that Ea, or Enki, as is more generally known, is the one that was genuinely the wisdom teacher, the one that wanted to help humanity grow and become self-empowered. Is that kind of in alignment with what the Andromedans recall or what they told you?
Well, their perspective is that Ea did give us many gifts, including part of himself, and his wife gave us part of themselves. But the true champion of all of the Anunnaki, the true champion of humanity, was always Thoth. Always Thoth. Okay, he outshined all of the others in his dedication to helping humanity. So it is my perspective that at this particular point, he would be the only one I would be interested in meeting at this particular point. It's not to say Enki isn't deserving. It's looking back in hindsight, which of course is impossible to do regarding these things, I would have expected Enki to fight harder for us. And I'm not sure he did, but even when he left, it was always Thoth that was here helping humanity, wearing different hats, building different compounds, building and rebuilding other civilizations, such as Machu Picchu and things of that nature. That was all Thoth. And he was also protecting people from renegade groups. There was a lot of kidnapping going on once Enki left. The Enlil group, not all that different from the Orion group, quite frankly. They just they had a party with us, and terrible things happened. And there was nobody there to correct him. Enki was forced to leave. So, Enlil he just turned a blind eye to a lot of things because he didn't care for humanity anyway. We were slaves. That's all we were to him. That's all we were ever going to be to him. We're slaves. And that's not how Thoth looked at us at all either. He saw us as human beings. He interacted with us. We interacted with many of them in Sumer. They walked amongst us. Chaldeans, extraterrestrials, walked among us. And this is just history. This is just history. This isn't comic book stuff. This is the history that's been hidden from us. And the world was known. The whole world was known where everything was, and most of the mines and tunnels that are throughout the planet, our forefathers built, looking for gold for the Anunnaki, and probably other things too that have we've lost record of because of the suppression of our history. So, it's a fascinating time. But, in my humble opinion, and right now, the only one I'd be interested in meeting is Thoth.
Interesting. Okay. And Thoth is also one name that is associated with Hermes, Quetzalcoatl, Viracocha.
Yes.
Ningish Zida, is that another one?
Yes, it is.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, so that's because they had already changed all the languages in order to divide humanity. So he had to introduce himself based on the language, and that's why he had different names.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I won't keep you too much longer. I know you're getting over something, but I know the role of Space Force and Space Command, that you've referred to them repeatedly as fighting the good fight. So, what do you know of Space Force and Space Command really helping humanity get onto this, or to stay on this positive timeline?
That's a conversation I have to have with you offline. It's worth the conversation, but that's a conversation I have to have with you offline. Okay? They're busting their ass, though. They are. They are holding it together, and they are doing everything they can to hold everyone accountable. And that's the key here, is holding everybody accountable.
Okay. Well, I know that Space Force is actively trying to bring about this Star Trek future. That's actually part
Yes.
of the mandate. People don't realize that Space Force was formed out of US Air Force Space Command, and that in 2019, the year Space Force was created, they had a Space Futures workshop there they're just in the headquarters of in Colorado there, I think Peterson Air Force Base,
Yeah.
and they actually chose a Star Trek future as something that they want to create over the next 60 years. So Space Force and Space Command, both of them have been formed as a direct result of this desire to create a Star Trek future. So yeah,
Okay.
who
Can
wouldn't
I
want to
elaborate
embrace
on that? May I be free to elaborate on that?
that? Sure, please.
Okay. Um, you know, back in the 40s and 50s, and William Tompkins talked about this, that the Navy was already building its own fleet. Okay. And they had a great deal of success in building an anti-gravity space fleet. We know it today through back channels known as Solar Warden. I think it probably has a different name at this point, but the name is not important, frankly. But knowing that it exists is important. So these programs operated completely in the dark, off the shelf. You know, the CIA did the same thing with the contractors. So now what we do have is two Star Trek space fleets, for lack of a better word. Space Force's job is to grab those two units, form them into one if it's possible, and literally bring those programs down to Earth, to the surface, to share it with humanity, share the technology, and to introduce humanity to space, to working in space, to exploring in space, to learning about other civilizations in space. And one of the keys to making this happen and being able to get control of the technology in these programs was to change the currency. Change the currency. Because these programs were being paid for. I mean, do you honestly think that, you know, our national debt, $378 trillion, I think is the actual number? Do you actually think all of that was spent here on Earth? No, it was not. No, it was not. Monies were put into these programs, but because these were all off ledger and in different accounting programs, there was no way to know where this money was going. Blockchain is not new. This is not new technology. Okay, these programs were using these accountability ledgers so that officers and personnel on our starships could be paid, but they couldn't be paid in US dollars. It had to be something else so that they could go to commissary and get the things that they needed. Diego Garcia Island and other islands in the Pacific, you know, the cargo would be loaded in some of these underground bases under the water, and then it would go off into space, and they would link up with a ship and they would drop their cargo. You know, they were being fueled and resupplied from Earth. They couldn't actually be a total breakaway civilization because there were still elements of things they needed from the Earth. But the crew, you know, they didn't work for nothing. They had to be able to buy things from commissary. This is very much like any military operation would be run. That's how this is being run. So, but all that's being brought down to the Earth now in a very slow, methodical process. So when they talk about a Star Trek future, it's because it already exists, Michael. It already exists. It's that right there. We just don't know it because they haven't shown themselves yet. Problem is we have two fleets. One is very regressive or become regressive, and one that's very benevolent and actually really truly gives a damn about humanity. And when they go out into space, they act accordingly as well, with respect towards all. Those are the Solar Warden group is the group that's been approached by many benevolent races and have offered their assistance and their help. The other side, they sold us out a long time ago. They didn't give a damn about us whatsoever. They were just doing their own thing and looking at profit. They were running 30 and back programs, 20 and back programs, or anything like that. They were trafficking human beings off world. You know, the same shit they do down here, they were doing out there. So there's contrast. There's still a great deal of contrast on the earth. But you know, the thing about contrast is that it helps you, it gives you perspective, and it helps you formulate what it is that you do want and not what you don't want. So, and we're getting there. We are getting there very, very quickly, choosing what we don't want. So, excuse me, I'm so sorry. So it's there. It's just, how do you get it down to earth? How do you take control of these programs? Not that you'll ever get 100% because they're used to sort of doing their own thing, but interact in an open way with the surface, with humanity, because they're still dependent on Earth. And a lot of that literally has to do with the exchange of the transfer from fiat to an actual genuine currency, because it literally forces an interaction, an open dialogue with these programs. And Space Force, it's my understanding that Space Command, and now specifically Space Force, is the bridge between that world, Solar Warden world, Star Trek world, Space Force, and humanity. Okay? No idea what's going to happen with the Safari Group, the CIA, the Dark Fleet. No idea what's going to happen with those guys.
We're all wondering.
Yeah, I hope they figure it out. I really do.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think you're right that the time is on our side. That, you know, whatever shenanigans, the deep state, the Dark Fleet, whatever name you want to give that negative CIA-run, German-run group, whatever name you want to give them, that there's a stalemate now, but that stalemate will collapse because the consciousness is rising, and as we become more aware, then this is going to result in some very positive things. But you know, we're going to still witness some birth pangs, and people are talking about a bumpy ride over the next year as we go into the election season.
I think that's true. I do. I think that's true. Yeah, but we'll get through it. We will absolutely get through it. If we stick together, we can easily get through it.
Yeah. Well, I'm really encouraged to see how quickly now that you've got Tucker Carlson embracing the UFO issue, putting it out there, Joe Rogan, many of the big podcasters now are tackling the UAP issue, and they're just bringing they're red pilling millions of people that have thought that this was a nonsense issue. Now all of a sudden they're having to learn about David Grush, the UAP Disclosure Act, the Nimitz sighting in 2004, and then the Roswell. And
no, there's been some real pioneers before us who have done who have shared a lot of incredible information that were trashed, and now they're getting their kudos, and I think it's awesome. I do. I think it's They're, Michael, we have a saying on the planet that, in the end, the only thing left standing will be the truth. It doesn't have to be propped up with propaganda. Okay. And I think we should always start there with the truth. And the many, many whistleblowers for years and years and years, such as JP, who have led the way and have tried to, open humanity's mind to the possibilities. And now that they're moving past possibilities to probabilities, I think they'll get a lot more attention. This has to happen. This has to happen. For humanity to make a huge consciousness leap, we have to know who we are. We have to know how far we've come. We have to understand, what makes us different. And the only way to actually do that is to interact with another species, another race that isn't all that different from us, because now we have something to compare ourselves to. And now, outside of our own dark fleet, we're surrounded by benevolence. We really are. People, space star nations that really have a vested interest in seeing us make the jump. And I just don't see it not happening.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm looking forward to the day where the contactees, people like you, Elena, Jean-Charles, and many others who are having these direct experiences with the extraterrestrials, that they're given time of day. Because right now, I mean, it's like whistleblowers are suddenly, point of focus for the mainstream, and they're now looking at whistleblowers, and maybe people like JP will be looked at more closely. But I think, to really make sense of it all, to get the big picture, we have to look at the contactees, such as yourself. So, Alex, I know you do a regular set of podcasts, webinars on alexcollier.org. Anything you want to say about? I know you got some big, big topics to tackle coming up. So, anything you want to say about your webinar series?
If you're not busy and you want to, I don't know how to sell this. They're interesting. Everybody says they're interesting. They're always a lot of fun. There's always great questions. Really, really smart people there. I enjoy that part. We have the live version, and then there's always the replays. There's a scale of pay for those. So, if you're interested in this topic, interests you, then give it a look-see. Take it out for a spin and see if it works for you. And if it doesn't, that's okay. Just keep on looking, keep on searching for what it is that you want to know. And always remember this: in defending each other, we will remain free. Okay? That's how this works. We have to defend each other, and then we will remain free. The minute we don't watch each other's back, bad things happen. Okay, Michael, it's been an honor and a privilege, and thank you for your assistant there, and give my best to Angelica. It's been an honor and privilege. I actually thought this was going to only be 30 minutes. Boy, was I wrong.
We got you for the hour. So, well, thanks, Alex. Pleasure to have you back on the show again. Look forward to the next time.
Take care. God bless everyone.
You have been listening to Exopolitics Today with Dr. Michael Salla. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Join or start a conversation in the comments. Take the time to explore the vast library of best-selling books, webinars, and podcasts by Dr. Salla. Visit exopoliticstoday.com.